Linda Cooper, and thanks so much for joining us on the New 100 Longevity Campaign. Today's episode, we are shining the spotlight on Alzheimer's and how close we are to actually finding the cure. Today's guest, oh my gosh, is so impressive. I can't wait to introduce him to all of you. But this disease actually hits close to home for me because my own father suffered from dementia, and I saw its debilitating effects, not just on my father, but also on my mother, who was his caretaker. So it's really, really powerful. And according to the Alzheimer's Association, 1 out of 3 seniors die from complications with dementia or Alzheimer's diseases. So this is crucial that we deal with this impacting our future now, because in 2050, our senior population is going to triple in size. We actually have early prevention ways to detect type 2 diabetes and heart disease, but we haven't implemented that yet for Alzheimer's. We only address the issue once it's too late. But today's guest is planning to change all of that. He is Dr. Rudy Tanzi, world-renowned neuroscientist pioneer, and through his lifelong career's research and devotion to trying to discover the cure for Alzheimer's, we now know the primary genes that cause the mutation for this disease to occur. So in the very near future, just like we are able to test for type 2 diabetes and heart disease, we'll be able to test for Alzheimer's before it hits at the early detection stage, which is huge, so that we can prevent it and actually eradicate it completely from patients who are suffering. He has a little white pill called GSM, which he is going to tell us all about. 20 years in the making to have this drug, and it's ready to go to human clinical trials next year. And this is super exciting stuff, people. I mean, beyond excited, especially if you know somebody that's suffering with this disease. It's huge. In addition to all of that, Dr. Tanzi was named Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in 2015, and he made Harvard Alumni's Most Influential list as well. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He co-authored 3 books with Deepak Chopra, and the one that I was really into was The Healing Self, also Super Genes and Super Brain. Actually, we should call him Superhuman because on top of all that, when he's not busy saving the world, he's also an accomplished musician and he plays backup keyboards with Aerosmith. So, I mean, come on. I'm so excited to get started, and I can also list all of his incredible titles in the roll credits because they are so long. I can't even list them all, and I want you to see everything that he is doing, and most importantly, he's curing Alzheimer's. So let's welcome Dr. Tanzi to the show and get started. Dr. Tanzi, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have you on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Linda. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, I was sharing with the audience that my own father suffered from dementia, and I think let's just start with that. What is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? When people say early stages of dementia, that's really early stages of Alzheimer's. Is that right?
Well, dementia is like an umbrella term. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, and it's the most common form of dementia in the elderly. But you can have dementia also due to a stroke. You can have dementia due to even a vitamin deficiency or other types of rare dementias. But Alzheimer's is the most common dementia, especially in the elderly population. The primary care physician, who's not a neurologist, they would probably say dementia because they would leave it to a neurologist later to do what's called the differential diagnosis to ask, is this dementia most likely due to Alzheimer's disease? And ultimately, you'd have to do brain scans and imaging and other tests to then validate, yes, this is dementia due to Alzheimer's. But the fact is, in 90% of cases, if you're elderly with dementia, it ends up being Alzheimer's disease.
Yes, and so I was sharing your incredible work decades of research in your lifelong career. What you've done, this research has been outstanding, and I'd like for you to share with the audience the genes that you've discovered that cause the mutation for Alzheimer's to occur in the first place.
Well, actually, we know of about 300 mutations now. Well, back when I first started in research, I had worked on a project that was the first ever to find a disease gene, and that was Huntington's disease. And that was the first time we used genetics to find a gene for a disease where we had no idea what caused it. And that prompted the need for the Human Genome Project a long time ago. And then I started studying Down syndrome. And you may or may not know this, but Down syndrome subjects, when they go on to older age, inevitably get Alzheimer's pathology.
Oh, no.
And that made me suspect there would be a gene for Alzheimer's disease. There were none yet. And I was a student at Harvard Medical School. And I suspected there might be a gene for Alzheimer's, and it would be on the chromosome that's involved in Down syndrome. So following that lead, I went after it, and sure enough, that's how I found the first Alzheimer's gene back in the summer of 1986. Published that in 1987. Some other people found it as well. And that we called the amyloid precursor protein gene. And what that gene is it's the gene that makes the material in the senile plaques. So in Alzheimer's disease, you get these plaques outside of nerve cells in the brain. And that's the first event that accumulates. And then those plaques cause other events and more pathology till eventually you get the disease. But that whole process can take decades before you actually get the disease. From the original plaque to disease can take decades.
Yes, yes. And we test for early detection with type 2 diabetes and for heart disease and a lot of age-related diseases, but we haven't done anything for Alzheimer's. I'm hoping we can change that.
Well, you're right. Alzheimer's is way behind. So it's a good point you make, because in heart disease and diabetes, right, we don't wait until your heart or your pancreas degenerates to the point that you can't function, right? We see early warning signs, glucose, insulin, cholesterol. We treat the disease before it happens. The elephant in the room is that in Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative disorders, Parkinson's disease, ALS, we wait till the brain degenerates to the point you can't think right or move right, in the case of Parkinson's, and then we try to reverse it. And that's just not the way to do it, because we didn't really know how to look for the early warning signs. So my lab found the 3 initial genes for Alzheimer's back in the 80s and 90s, and those genes cause the early onset form, where those mutations and those 3 genes, there's about 300 of them, guarantee the disease. That's unfortunate.
Of course.
The good news is that only 1 or 2% of Alzheimer's involves those 3 genes. The other 98 to 99% does involve genes, and we know about 3 dozen of them now, but they carry mutations that don't guarantee it. That means your lifestyle and how you live your life makes a difference. That's why I wrote the books with Deepak Chopra, to say, here's what you can do right now with your life.
Actually,
that was not meant to be a prompt, by the way.
No. Let me just go ahead and hold up my props. This is not an infomercial, though. Actually, I really enjoyed the healing self. And in fact, I interviewed Deepak Chopra on a past lifestyle show that I hosted as well. And he was wonderful at his Chopra Center in Carlsbad. And this one was definitely my favorite. But I actually also loved Superbrain because I've always felt that the brain is so powerful. I'm a very optimistic person. I think a lot of, things like it feeds into one thing. It's kind of snowballs. And this was really interesting for me as well. So, yeah.
Well, Superbrain was probably my favorite because it was our first one. My first book ever was Decoding Darkness on how we found the Alzheimer's genes, more of a science detective story. But Superbrain was really a book I was writing my whole life since a teenager. I mean, literally, I took out pieces of paper and little notebooks that I've been keeping since I was in high school with the ideas that finally it came to fruition in Superbrain. So that was my baby, Superbrain was and then after Superbrain did so well, it was a New York Times bestseller, we did Super Genes, because I'm a geneticist. And so where we made this point that I just made, which is 1 or 2% of Alzheimer's involves gene mutations where there's unfortunately nothing you can do about it, but 98 to 99% of Alzheimer's genetic susceptibility is something you can do about it with your lifestyle, and that's what we like to teach about.
What are some of the ways that you would recommend to change your lifestyle and prevent Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so to tell you that, let me just very briefly tell you the order of events of what goes wrong in the brain physically.
Okay. No, I like that.
You get the plaques, and then the plaques cause the nerve cells to create these twisted, wispy filaments inside. They're called tangles. The real name is neurofibrillary tangles.
Okay.
And those tangles kind of choke the nerve cell from inside and kill it. And then as those nerve cells die, the brain reacts to that, just like the body does, with inflammation. So think about COVID, right?
Yeah.
The COVID virus doesn't kill that many cells. But as it kills cells, the body responds to that with inflammation, and that's what puts you in serious trouble for the unfortunate folks who have serious symptoms or die.
Right, the cytokine storm.
The cytokine storm. In Alzheimer's, it's the same thing. The plaques and tangles kill nerve cells. That causes a cytokine storm in the brain instead of the lungs, like COVID. And then that leads to the inflammation. And the inflammation is what kills, many, many nerve cells, and then you get the disease.
Yes, and actually, can I tell you this? Just as to interject, every single expert that's been on the longevity series has had this common theme. It's all about inflammation, every single guest. So
yeah,
it's a common theme, and that is really to prevent inflammation to occur and for optimized health.
Right. So if you want to prevent inflammation, you could stop the initiating pathology that gets you there. Like I played basketball way too long for way too many hours per week for way too much of my life, and now I have inflammation on my knees. I could have avoided
jumping rope.
I could have avoided that by playing a little less basketball, right? COVID, wear a mask and be careful. Then you avoid inflammation later on that's caused by the virus. Alzheimer's disease, you can think about how to avoid getting the plaques and the tangles early on, and we're learning about that as well. Exercise is key, as is diet, and we can get to that. But at the end of the day, here's a take-home point. If you want to treat a patient who's suffering right now, you have to treat inflammation.
Yes.
Or in the case of Alzheimer's, neuroinflammation. But the future for preventing the disease will be stop the initiating pathology like plaques and tangles that get you there.
Yes.
So in the future, we'll do blood tests when you're 40 or 50 years old.
Future meaning how far in the near future? Because I'm hoping it's the near future because, people need this now.
It's the near future. I would say that we have drugs already in the works that stop the plaques. And if you stop the plaques, you stop the tangles. We can nip it in the bud, but you have to know when to use those drugs because they need best be used a decade or more before symptoms. So the blood tests, we already can image. We can do it right now. We can image your brain and tell you if you're on your way with plaques and tangles. Right now, it's FDA approved.
Okay.
It's expensive. And there's blood tests coming. There are new blood tests coming.
When?
Very soon. There are already blood tests available to look for evidence of plaques and tangles in the brain. And the newest blood test probably will be FDA approved within the next year or so. So the ability to do the early detection with a simple blood test is right around the corner.
That's amazing.
And the drugs that will stop that pathology and nip it in the bud, the way we nip cholesterol in the bud, so you don't have to get congestive heart failure. So we now know that inflammation is the key. And in all of the books we write and all of your guests you have, we tell you how to stop inflammation because if you want to help somebody right now who's already starting to suffer, you have to hit inflammation. If you want to keep the body healthy for the longest possible time and have health span, keep up with lifespan, you need to stop inflammation. And in the brain health span, that means neuroinflammation. So when I was about to go give my talks about the healing self, I had to figure out a way to encapsulate the second half of the book on the 7-day action plan.
Yes.
How to lower neuroinflammation in your brain. And that's when I came up with the acronym. I was actually in the shower, and I keep a pad in the shower called Aqua Notes, and with a little pencil that says don't let those good
I'm
ideas go
getting a
down the
great
drain.
visual, and so is everyone else.
Sorry. But anyway, but focus on the Aqua notepad.
Right.
And right. And so when I came up with the acronym SHIELD, your brain. SHIELD, and I quickly tweeted it. And it went viral. And then next thing you know, SHIELD was everything from Today's Show, NBC Nightly News, CBS This Morning, Dr. Oz, etc. So it became a thing. So SHIELD is sleep, 7 to 8 hours. Even if you only get 5 or 6 hours of sleep, take a nap. Because usually with naps, you go into deep sleep and some REM, and that's when the brain cleans itself out of the amyloid. And I call it mental floss.
I love it.
Right? Mental floss.
Yeah.
So if I'm finding that the key is the deep sleep. Okay. So you want to get at least an hour to an hour and a half of deep sleep per night, because that's when the brain, all of those scrubby bubbles come out and clean the brain. So these little cells in the brain called microglia that clean the brain when you sleep.
Okay. I'd like to just know what time frame that is. Like after you've fallen asleep for a couple hours, is that when deep sleep happens?
Yeah, so right when you fall asleep at night, you get deep sleep, a good chunk of it. And then you go into light sleep, and then you have REM, dream sleep. And then usually after dream sleep, you go back into deep sleep.
Okay.
So it's really cool how the brain takes care of itself at night, because with dreaming, you're taking all of your experiences of the day and all the experiences that were conjured up by those experiences by memory, and you create fictional accounts of them. You create TV dramas of them that are based on reality. You know, like when you get the TV show that says based on real events.
Right.
That's what your dreams are. They're
And
you
it's usually like
fictionalizing.
something in your subconscious that's triggering that from
Yeah.
an event that occurred.
You're fictionalizing your memories based on real events. But believe it or not, it's how you consolidate memory and keep those events stored, through your neural network, 100 billion nerve cells and trillions of connections or synapses. So, and then right after you consolidate your memories with dreams, you go into deep sleep where you actually store that information. And at the same time, the brain starts cleaning out all the crap and debris that built up all day. And literally the brain squeezes it out of the brain, squeezes it out of the brain through the lymphatic system into the body where it can be, disposed of as waste. So
Okay.
literally during deep sleep, your brain is like cleaning itself of waste and actually extruding it. And you need an hour, preferably an hour and a half of that per day.
Okay.
So if you,
So I don't remember my dreams for the most part. So is that significant at all? Does that mean anything?
no, it doesn't. As long as you're dreaming, your brain's is storing memories for you.
Okay.
Some people would say it's not a good thing to remember your dreams because they're so, they're fictionalized accounts of your memories. There's a lot of controversy about that.
Right. So we got S for shield is sleep. So let's continue with
Yeah. H stands for handling stress. So measuring expectation and, not being too hard on yourself because you're not answering emails or not expecting too much of others, not expecting too much of yourself, and meditating.
Yes.
And, Deepak Chopra and I ran a meditation trial at Carlsbad where you interviewed him.
Oh, wow.
We had 30 women learning to meditate for a week intensively, 30 other women at the same place with the same diet, but not meditating. And then 30 women who are expert meditators teaching. And then we looked after 1 week at all of the gene expression changes. We talked about this in Super Genes, the second book, and all the changes in the genome. And it was amazing how this 1 week of meditation reduced inflammation,
Wow.
reduced the genes that the activity of the genes that cause Alzheimer's, and it increased the activity of an enzyme called telomerase. You probably had that on your show before.
Dr.
Right?
Bill Andrews, who is the guru of telomerase. In fact, he actually founded one of the telomerase genes. So yes, that's a huge factor. And if you all didn't see that episode, it's episode 2, just FYI.
Telomerase, the anti-aging enzyme that grows the tips of chromosomes and makes cells live longer. That activity was increased 40% just in 1 week of intensive meditation. So I mean, if I had to write a science fiction book, I wouldn't have gone that far, but that's what the results said about how powerful meditation is.
That's amazing. I'm a huge fan of meditating, and I find that I should make more time to do that on a regular basis because I'd like to be able to do it daily. I usually get it in mostly on the weekends because I'm so busy during the week. But I think meditation is huge, and I really am going to try to make it more of, that's going to be my lifestyle change, is I'm going to do it daily instead of just on the weekends.
Cool, that's a good thing.
So we're continuing down the path of I.
Yeah, I is what we're doing now, interaction with others.
Okay.
So loneliness increases risk for Alzheimer's by twofold.
Wow.
Because it's a form of stress. If you're alone and you love it, great. If you're alone and you hate it, bad.
Yeah.
So staying socially integrated, having friends and family available, assuming they don't stress you out. It's all about de-stressing. Because
Right.
chronic stress leads to chronic inflammation, bottom line. So you have to figure out ways to remove stressors every single day in your life. That's handling stress and interaction together.
Okay.
And E is exercise. And yes, and exercise, even 20, 30 minutes a day. I do the recumbent bike behind me every day, somewhere around 80, 90 RPM for about a half hour on the bike. Exercise helps clear the plaque from the brain, and it also stops the inflammation. But the really cool thing it does that we just found recently is that it causes new nerve cells to be born in the part of your brain that gets affected in Alzheimer's disease, the short-term memory part of the brain called the hippocampus. And so we grew up thinking you never get new nerve cells in your brain, right? You get what you get. And I remember, we go out at night and mom would say, don't drink too much because you're going to kill those nerve cells, and that's all you got. You don't get any new ones. Well, it turns out you do. And the part of the brain that's for short-term memory, you can grow new nerve cells, and it happens when you exercise. So
Fabulous.
Another good reason to exercise.
Yeah. And so we have now hit E, so we've got to do L.
L, yes. L is also what our viewers are doing right now, learning new things. So every time you look, not brain games, but learning new things.
The show.
Literally watching shows like this,
Yes.
reading a book about something new you're going to learn, or learning an instrument or a language. When you learn new things, you build new synapses. The synapses are the connections between the nerve cells. That's how our nerve cells communicate, by making physical connections at synapses. And we have trillions of them. But here's what happens in Alzheimer's disease. Everything that goes wrong, it's plaque, tangle, neuroinflammation. At the end of the day, it's losing synapses that leads to dementia.
That makes sense.
And the more synapses you lose, the more dementia you have. So the more synapses you make every day by learning new things, and by the way, when you make new synapses, you reinforce the old ones, because all the learning is based on what you associating the new thing with what you already knew, right?
Right.
So the more synapses you make every day, the more you can lose before you lose it.
Before you really lose it.
Yeah, so really lose it. So we talk about resilience in two ways. Resilience is build up more synapses so that it's like money in the bank, right? You can lose more and still be fine. So you want to build up your synaptic reserves, just like you build up financial reserves as you're thinking about retiring.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it makes perfect sense. And actually, Albert Einstein said, once you stop learning, you start dying. And that's like a perfect...
It is. I didn't know that, but that's very true. And then the other side of resilience is avoiding inflammation, which is what SHIELD is all about. So avoiding inflammation removes the killer. Making new synapses builds up your defense against what's being killed, which are the nerve cells in the synapses. See? So D stands for diet, and the best diet we know of for the brain is the Mediterranean diet.
Okay, and that's not beef, right? That's fish and vegetables.
No red meat. If you do eat fish, I'm a vegetarian, but fish in place of meat, or other protein-based sources instead of meat, like I do other protein-based
I
items.
went off of meat long ago. I love fish and seafood, and tons of vegetables and leafy greens and fruits and all of that. And so
That's
the
right.
diet is huge. And make sure you get a
Yeah.
lot of fiber too, right?
Yeah, I love fish too, but that's why I don't eat them.
You're one of those.
Yeah. But anyway, in the Mediterranean diet, you get your seeds and vegetables and nuts and fruits. And what is all that plant-based diet for? It's to give you fiber.
Right. And
And
I just think
fiber is
fiber's
important.
huge.
Fiber feeds your gut bacteria. So you have trillions of gut bacteria that when they're balanced, keep your entire body free of inflammation. Your gut bacteria talk to your brain with chemical messengers that control inflammation.
Yes.
Even we published 3 different scientific studies showing your gut bacteria control how much plaque is in your brain. Your gut bacteria control your inflammation. So you got to keep those bacteria happy. And a lot of people think it's enough just to take a probiotic or eat yogurt.
No.
Well, the thing is, you got trillions of bacteria. Adding a billion of maybe 5 or 10 species when you have trillions of bacteria and thousands of species, probably not enough. The better thing to do is take care of them by feeding them what they like to eat. And that's plants, plant-based diet. So
Yeah.
cruciferous vegetables, fruits, whole grains. A lot of people have stopped whole grains because of this idea that you can't eat carbs. This
Right.
idea that bread causes Alzheimer's, which is not true. It's you want to limit your carbs, like you limit anything, limit your gluten. But whole grains are very important for you. You know, we evolved as herbivores, not carnivores. That's a biological fact. You know, we don't have big fangs to chew raw meat. We have gnashers for grains.
Yeah.
Our stomach acid cannot take care of raw meat like a carnivore. And our colon is made so it winds, which is not for meat, because when the meat winds around the colon, it putrefies. That's made for grains. So everything about, so somehow, somewhere back in evolution, it was really tough to get a herbivore diet, and we went to become carnivores to survive. But evolutionarily, that's an aberration. And eventually, as the earth can't sustain growing meat, we'll go back to what we evolutionarily was supposed to be, which is herbivores.
Right.
So I
And
just want to say
actually,
that.
I went off of meat when I was pregnant with my firstborn. I had a download maybe from the universe telling me, like, it turned me off. I couldn't even stand the smell of cooked hamburger or looking at a steak. And I used to eat like steak and prime rib, and it just like cold
Yeah.
turkey, and I haven't looked back. But so moving right along, besides your all of the shield factors, what else do you recommend as far as supplements or things that we can take?
Yeah, so I'm always really careful when I talk about supplements because, you know, until you do clinical trials, even these lifestyle interventions, when we say sleep and meditation, exercise, diet, until you do the clinical trials that shows definitively that it reduces risk for Alzheimer's, you can only recommend it and say it's a good idea.
Right.
And no one should make any claims like, oh, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep absolutely prevents Alzheimer's. So there are other folks out there who write books like guaranteed to end or reverse Alzheimer's. No, until you do the trials, you got to be responsible and not give people false hope. I want to say that first.
Okay.
So for all the supplements that I recommend to friends and family and that I take every day, and you know, I work with professional sports teams and they're getting banged in the head every day, instant inflammation every day in practice, right? Tangles of inflammation.
Alzheimer's with all of that impact.
So it's different. So Alzheimer's disease, the amyloid causes the tangles, and then those spread and you get inflammation and you get disease. You can get tangles by head bangs without the need for amyloid. So think about them all as tangles, killing nerve cells, inflammation. But if the head bangs got you there without amyloid, that's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. If the amyloid got you there, that's Alzheimer's.
Okay.
If other gene mutations for frontal lobe dementias got you, that's called rare tauopathies. But so it all depends on how you make the tangles to kill the nerve cells. And in Alzheimer's, that's the amyloid plaques that get you there. But the head bangs can get you there. At the end of the day, inflammation is needed to kill enough synapses to get the disease. So you want to fight inflammation all the time. So what I've done in my lab is we invented something called Alzheimer's in a dish.
Okay.
Which means we took human stem cells, we turned them into different types of brain cells. We put them together in a gel-like material that's similar to the brain, and then we let them go. And they form little mini brain organoids the size of paper punches.
Wow.
And then we put the Alzheimer's genes that we discovered into them, and we can recreate the entire lifetime of Alzheimer's pathology in 1 month in a paper punch-sized brain organoid this big.
Amazing.
So you can fit those 96 of those in a tray this big and screen every drug, natural supplement, whatever you want to see what stops the plaques, what stops the tangles, and most importantly, what stops the neuroinflammation. And doing that, we found drugs, and I can tell you about trials we've done.
Tell us everything.
Yeah, and so I'll tell you about the drugs afterwards. But we found about a dozen natural products that very effectively stop neuroinflammation in different ways or protect against it, okay? And so when we find these supplements and natural products that work in the dish, we're now planning clinical trials with those, but we haven't done them yet. So we can't make any claims about reducing risk for Alzheimer's yet, okay? Just to be clear. I also want to make clear that the two supplements I like the most, I did get involved financially. I started a company to make one of them with a friend of mine, and another company that makes the one I like, I've gone on to be a consultant. And so one of them is True Niagen.
This should be sponsor.
True Niagen or nicotinamide riboside from Chromadex. And I love Chromadex because the CEO is Rob Fried, who produced my favorite movie, Rudy.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to add that I actually sourced you as our Alzheimer's longevity expert without knowing anything about your connection with True Niagen. So it was actually after the fact. So True Niagen is the show sponsor, and
Really?
they are, yes, really. Just so that the audience is aware that the two are totally unrelated, because I wanted to have you on.
But it wasn't Chromadex that put us together, was it?
No, actually what happened was because as I shared, Alzheimer's to me is one of the age-related diseases that I wanted to make sure that I brought awareness on what is coming down the pipeline, because there are a lot, and everyone has their different area of expertise, but there's some of these scientists have had proof of concept for over a decade. You have had proof of concept for 2 decades, right? Plus. So I want to make sure that the audience is in the know about what is the latest breakthrough discoveries in each of these areas, and how it's going to be beneficial to optimize our health span and our lifespan.
So I'll mention the top supplements. And we decided when we built this Alzheimer's in a dish mini brain model, we said, let's go after natural products and supplements that might hit the plaques or the tangles or the neuroinflammation. And out of that, we got a bunch of them actually. And one of them that worked was nicotinamide riboside, which is sold as a supplement called True Niagen from Chromadex. And I have since become a consultant for Chromadex. And what we found is that the True Niagen, by providing extra energy to the cells, helps make them resilient against forming tangles. It also had an effect on the production of the amyloid plaque. But what was most interesting to me recently is that it can induce the birth of new nerve cells in the brain, just like exercise does. It's called neurogenesis. So I religiously take True Niagen, and
I love it.
I feel great on it. I can tell when I'm not on it. You feel different.
No, I actually, Dr. Charles Brenner is going to be our finale episode for season 1, episode 2.
Good.
He was, and of course, let me just share with the audience, he is the scientist who discovered nicotinamide riboside, and that's how the whole patent came to be for True Niagen. And he's also their chief scientific advisor at Chromadex. But I personally Let me just say this. I love it when things happen organically, and I found out about True Niagen with the first episode with Dr. Sandra Kaufman. In her Kaufman protocol, I was taking an NAD supplement, but I was backing the wrong NAD horse. And as soon as she told me about, how this, True Niagen cornered the market coming up with this, brilliant product, as soon as the interview was over, I contacted them, and the rest is history. So
I had no idea about that.
yeah.
I mean, I'm on the advisory board. It was Charlie Brenner who brought me into the advisory board. That's how I got involved
Wow.
with
Okay.
Niagen. And then I started taking it, and I was sold. So
1 degree of separation in multiple ways.
yeah.
Depot, True Niagen. But
Well, that was years ago. But anyway, the second supplement, the second most important supplement that worked was a form of cat's claw. Cat's claw is a woody vine that grows in the Amazonian rainforest in Peru. And it's called cat's claw because the vine has a thorn on it that looks like a cat's claw. And the results were so strong on that I got together with another scientist who's a friend of mine and decided to start a company. If something works really well, sometimes you have to start the company yourself to get it out there.
right.
I'm not afraid to do that. The company's called Cognitive Clarity, Inc., and we made a cat's claw supplement of this extract, and it's called Percepta, Percepta, Percepta. The website's perceptabrain.com.
Okay.
And what I like about it is that it hit, at least in transgenic Alzheimer mice models and in the mini human brain model in a dish, it hits all the pathologies. And I want to reiterate that we haven't done trials on it yet. We're planning to do clinical trials on it. We're starting already a clinical trial on True Niagen for Alzheimer's to see how it works in humans.
Ooh, I have to see that.
But until we do the trials, we can't make any claims. You got to just say, look, here's what we see in the lab, and here's what we predict could happen, and it looks to be safe. So I recommend, the True Niagen to family, friends, sports teams where they get banged in the head, et cetera.
Right. Okay. So I know how I feel on True Niagen, which is fabulous. So what do you feel, if anything, on Perceptor? I have to try it. You have to send me some.
Yeah, Perceptor, True Niagen gives you a lot of energy and boost, and you just feel younger and vibrant. That's how I feel with that. Perceptor is more about focus. You're just more aware and more focused. It's the focus without any buzz. The other ones have no commercial interest, but they came up on our screen, so I take them. It's an antioxidant called quercetin.
That's Sandy's favorite, one of hers.
Yeah. And again, I didn't pick these based on reading anything.
Right.
These came out of my own screen of the Alzheimer's in a dish model. These were the ones that worked. But those are really the biggies. Another hit that we got that I'm just starting to take and see what it feels like is Bicalin.
What is it?
Bicalin, Bicalin. It comes from the skullcap flower.
Interesting.
And it was it had very nice effects. So we added Bicalin, and I also take what's called Bacopa monieri.
Okay, I've never heard of that one either. What is that?
Bacopa is Bacopa, Bacopa, and that's it. That's the list of the ones that perform well in my lab.
So those are supplements. What about drugs that are approved by the FDA on the market right now? Are there any ones that you would recommend that help with Alzheimer's?
It's interesting. Yes and no. So I've been screening in my lab for drugs and drug combinations or combinations of drugs and supplements that are able to either stop neuroinflammation or protect nerve cells against it. So I like to say one group of drugs will give the nerve cells a bulletproof vest. It's those same little cells I talked about earlier, the microglial cells that clean the brain while you sleep. If nerve cells are dying because of plaques and tangles, they switch from being housekeepers to killers.
Okay.
And they stop wiping out the part of the brain. So in other words, they're eating stuff, they're cleaning debris in your brain while you're sleeping, right?
Right.
Let's say they eat something and they say, wait, I just ate a nerve cell. That means a nerve cell died. They're programmed evolutionarily, going back tens of thousands of years, that when they sense a nerve cell died, they assume there's an infection, even if there's not. And they start wiping that whole part of the brain out. That's what neuroinflammation is.
I remembered seeing that as a visual. It was like they would eat the cell.
Yes, of a
Yeah.
little red cell eating a green nerve cell that we did in our Alzheimer's in a dish model. So we can see neuroinflammation in action with the little microglial cell eating the nerve cell. Normally he's eating debris and being a housekeeper. But if he thinks there's something wrong, then he starts eating the nerve cells and wiping out that part of the brain. That's what causes Alzheimer's. The plaques and tangles get you there, but it's the neuroinflammation that
Okay.
brings you to dementia. So we're trying to find drugs that either give your nerve cells a bulletproof vest and protect them against those little guys, or we're trying to take those little killer guys and tame them, chill them out to become just regular housekeepers again, to clean your brain while you sleep.
Right.
So you can imagine if you had a drug that stops them from killing and turns them back into a housekeeper, you get 2 for 1. You stop the neuroinflammation and you're telling them to eat the amyloid and get rid of it again.
And so what have you found?
So I started 2 companies. If you want to get something done, if you're ahead of the curve in science, you want to get something done, you got to do it yourself, right?
100%.
So,
That's in any business. In fact, that's my entrepreneurial spirit speaking is that's the only way that you can really, truly control your outcome. So continue.
yeah, because a lot of times when you're doing new science in the lab at the basic level, you come up with new ideas that it's going to take 10 years for the big pharma to get onto. So you either join companies or start companies. In one company, we actually found that an old asthma drug called cromolyn was able to take those little killer cells in the brain that cause neuroinflammation and turn them back into benevolent, kind housekeepers.
Wow.
But cromolyn, if you had asthma and you took cromolyn with an inhaler, it doesn't get into the brain.
So how do
So
you take it?
I worked with a company called AZ Therapies that reformulated the asthma drug cromolyn in a way that you can get it into the brain. The prediction is that when it gets into the brain, it will tell those little killer cells that are causing neuroinflammation to stop killing, and then converts them back into housekeepers that at night will clean your brain while you're sleeping. That form of cromolyn that gets into the brain is in a trial with AZ Therapies, and I'm the head of their scientific advisory board. I do have stock in the company for transparency purposes.
Right.
I have to say that, Harvard rules. And that we're doing a phase 3 trial on Alzheimer's disease that we'll have the answer on at the end of this year. We're doing a clinical trial of this cromolyn that gets into the brain that stops neuroinflammation and simultaneously promotes the clearance of the amyloid. So remember, the amyloid is like the match.
Right.
The tangles are like the brush fires that spread. But it's the forest fire of neuroinflammation that causes all the cell death and synapse loss that causes the disease.
Right.
So if you have a drug that puts out the fire by stopping neuroinflammation and blows out the match by getting rid of the amyloid, you hit both sides of the pathway. That's what we hope cromolyn does. That's what it did in the mice. So we studied, we published the mouse model. But the clinical trial on 600 Alzheimer's patients, phase 3 trial, will read out at the end of this year, and we got all our fingers. Yes.
Okay, so what is this called? Cromolyn?
It's called cromolyn. The company's called AZ Therapies, and the drug name in the company is ALZTOP1, ALZTOP1.
Okay, and that's not to be confused with GSM.
The most exciting news has to do with a company that I helped start back 7 years ago, when 2 undergraduates from Brown University, and I said undergraduates,
Yes.
had read about my work. We're doing a student project,
Love it.
had an idea for Alzheimer's disease that had to do with how to protect against neuroinflammation. They were in the Sigma Chi fraternity at Brown. When I was in college, I was in Sigma Chi. It's a national fraternity. And that's how they found my name, because that year in 2013, Brad Pitt and I I think it was Brad Pitt, got inducted into the Sigma Chi Hall of Fame.
Oh.
Anyway, I took the meeting with these kids because they were Sigma Chi's. They had this very naive idea about how to protect the nerve cells using a supplement called TUDCA, TUDCA, which I didn't mention in my list yet, and a drug called phenylbutyrate. And I said, okay. And I said, let's just show them how hard science really is. I said, let's test these 2 drugs. We're going to treat nerve cells with hydrogen peroxide, bleach. And let's see, because that's the ultimate example of what neuroinflammation does, times a million.
Right.
So this is like, and all the nerve cells die when you pour the hydrogen peroxide on. Let's see how well these two drugs do in protecting them. And I expected all of them to die. And, and then say, now you'll learn about how hard science really is, guys. And what happened was 90% of the nerve cells lived. Wow. 90%.
So they proved you wrong.
Well, yeah. So I said, so we did it again. I said, this has got to be wrong. We did it again. 95% lived.
Oh my God.
This was all written up in the New York Times, September 10th, New York Times, Science Times cover story. It was all about this story, about meeting these two guys, starting this. And why was the New York Times writing about it? Because fast forward 6, 7 years, we just published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine using this as a trial against ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, using the Ice Bucket Challenge money that was raised for ALS, and it worked. The trial worked. So that drug combination, because it worked in the ALS trial, now they're trying it in Alzheimer's as well, right? But the ALS trial worked. It got published in the top journal, for this type of thing, New England Journal of Medicine. Yeah. Big story. And now we're going for FDA approval for ALS right now. Sorry?
What is this drug going to be called?
I don't, right now it's called AMX0035. The name of the company is Amylyx, AMYLYX, so it's AMX0035. But it's going to have some fancy name. I don't know. But so
they're going to sell it to some big pharma, I'm sure.
I don't, you'd think so, but these guys, they're only 27 and 28 years old now. Okay. And they want to turn Amylyx into a big giant company. They don't want to sell it out. We'll see what happens. But
I was told that if you want to get anywhere with getting FDA approval, you have to have a big pharmaceutical company.
Well, tell them.
I don't want
no, I'm only kidding.
Bubble, but that's just what the experts.
No, you can get approval of a drug as a small biotech company. I mean, look, this little company they started, Amylyx, out of nothing. In my meeting in my office. I mean, that company's already. If they get FDA approval, that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar company.
Huge. Much help it's going to be with all of this.
They don't care about the money. It's unbelievable. Like
about the end product and getting it to market to people who need it now.
Yeah. So we'll see how this evolves. The important thing is a whole new drug combination that worked in ALS. Now it's being tried on Alzheimer's. And that drug combination is the bulletproof vest that protects the nerve cells from the neuroinflammation. The other company that has the trial going in Alzheimer's that's just started ALS, AZ Therapies, has the drug that stops the killer. So Amylyx with the two kids is the bulletproof vest. AZ Therapies takes out the snipers, takes out the killer. And ultimately, if both of those work, think about it, we put those together. And then we really, really help people. Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's disease, anywhere there's neuroinflammation, maybe even depression, autism, schizophrenia.
Right. So what is the time frame do you see this coming to market for people to be able to utilize these drugs for all of those different diseases?
Well, you have to go disease by disease. So like with Amylyx, if they get a
problem right now, that's an antiquated system.
I know. I mean, if you have a safe drug.
And CBER doesn't have a biology of aging. It doesn't. It's like a tackle one at a time. We're never going to get anywhere with that.
I agree with you, Linda, because if you're hitting neuroinflammation, you're protecting against it, and we know that neuroinflammation is what kills the nerve cells in ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, and you have a safe drug combination that does it, well, if it's approved for ALS, you can only use it there, but a physician can prescribe it off-label for another disease if they want.
Right, but how efficient is that? It's not. I mean, they
it's
just update
expensive. It's expensive. So in other words, let's say this Amylyx drug gets approved for ALS, and they're going to get it for a copay. If somebody wants it for Alzheimer's, where it's not approved, the physician can prescribe it, but they got to pay like some full price for the drug, and it could be like $1,000 a month or more.
That's terrible.
That's the problem with the system.
It's a big problem with the system, and I've been hearing about it. Everyone is singing the same tune. I've been hearing about it across the board from every single expert. I actually reached out to the FDA to try to get them on the show to see, what they're implementing, because they have on their website that they're, working on doing partnerships to get these advanced therapies to market faster, because they realize that there's a cog in the wheel, but nothing has changed. But I think that there's a big problem, and the public have been kept in the dark this entire time, and everyone knows that public opinion is the first line of attack as the major catalyst for change. That's why I'm doing this. This show is to bring awareness to the mainstream, because for whatever reason, they've been kept in the dark. And prime example is the COVID vaccine and the Operation Warp Speed that the FDA's been able to get out to the public, because guess what? Demand. Trump knows this better than anyone. He plays the game well. He works public opinion in his favor, and he's trying to get the vaccine to market before the next election. All of this plays a huge role. So anyway, let's hear the next story that's even worse than that one.
So if we want to help patients with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's disease, Huntington's, Lewy body disease, right now, you have to stop neuroinflammation. And that's the two companies I just told you about that I'm involved with. And there are other companies catching up now, also trying to target neuroinflammation. Right. And by the way, we only discovered the first neuroinflammation gene for Alzheimer's in my lab in 2008.
Only?
Remember, well, we found the original Alzheimer's genes for amyloid back in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
But we've only really learned about which genes control neuroinflammation since the last 10 years. And that's why the drug discovery, it takes a while. That's why we're just getting going with the drug discovery on neuroinflammation.
Yes.
But because we discovered the genes that make the amyloid, 30 years ago, we've had a big head start there.
Right.
But it took 20 years to make the drug I'm going to tell you about. So my colleague in San Diego, Steve Wagner, and I, when we looked at how these genes lead to the amyloid plaque in the brain, we came up with a drug we call a GSM.
Yes.
Gamma secretase modulator. And I won't get into all the details about it.
No, I want some details. I want to share the details, but you don't have to dumb it down. Just give us, the Cliff Notes version, please.
Okay, right. So the future will be that we don't get to the point of neuroinflammation. We nip the plaques in the bud stage when you're 40 or 50 years old, right? We don't wait till you're 70 or 80 and have the disease.
Right.
Because the amyloid is causing the disease. So the amyloid, see this little black band in this pen?
Okay.
That's the amyloid protein. It comes from a bigger protein. So to get this little black band out, you have to cut here and then there, right? You have to snip it.
Okay.
So here's what happens. The first cut, picture this is a protein sitting in your nerve cell, and it's sticking up out of the top of the nerve cell like this. Here's the nerve cell. This is inside the nerve cell. This is outside, like this. The first cut comes, and it clips over here, and that guy goes off outside the nerve cell, and he has he has a bunch of jobs. He does.
He's off.
See you later. Now look what happened. You got a stub stuck in the membrane. You gotta get rid of it, right? So what happens is another enzyme comes. That first enzyme is called beta secretase. The second enzyme is called gamma secretase. It clips right here at the bottom of this band. Okay, it looks like a Pac-Man, and it's in the membrane of the nerve cell, and it comes in and it starts to chomp this membrane. It has to get this little stub because it did its job. This guy went out. Now you got to get rid of this little. It's like you cut down a tree. You got to get rid of this the stump, right?
Right.
The stump. So now what will cut? So it cuts here, and now this little black piece can get released. That's the amyloid protein. That's the guy that's going to cause plaque.
Okay.
And it turns out that this little black band can be long or short. The mutations we discovered in the first Alzheimer's families either occur on this little stub and they make it too big to eat, or they occur in the guy that eats it and they close the mouth. too small.
Okay.
Either way, it can't fit in.
Right.
And so as a result, you make these long versions of the amyloid protein that stick together and make plaques. So it's very simple. What the idea that my colleague and I came up with, let's find drugs that open the mouth. So this guy can stick in further, and you only make the shorter little amyloids, and they don't make plaques.
Okay. And you found one called GSM?
Gamma secretase modulator.
Okay.
Not inhibitor, modulator. So the GSM, it took 20 years and about $30 million to get to the point we are today, which is we're going to the FDA and saying, we want to test this in patients. We're right at that stage right now of asking for permission from the FDA to start our clinical trials. And those clinical trials will start next year.
Alzheimer's.
For Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And this drug will be the drug. Think about heart disease, right?
Yeah.
If you have high cholesterol, if someone tells you when you're 40 or even 30, you have high cholesterol, you bring that cholesterol down early in life, either through diet and exercise, or if necessary, through a drug like Lipitor or statin or ezetimibe or whatever. And that's so you avoid heart disease when you're 60 or 70 by hitting the cholesterol when you're 30 or 40. The analogy in Alzheimer's, you want to hit the amyloid plaque when you're 30 or 40, so you don't get Alzheimer's when you're 60, 70, or 80.
Yes.
You have to do it early. This drug, the NIH and Cure Alzheimer's Fund together funded us to the point that we're now ready, that right now we're asking the FDA for approval. The NIH funded this, Cure Alzheimer's Fund funded it.
Right.
It took 20 years to now get to a drug. This is a whole new drug. This chemical entity has never been seen before. This is a.
Why would they have a problem with doing a trial with all of the research, 20 years of research?
No. They'll let us do the safety trial.
Okay.
They'll probably let it. I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid of what comes later.
In what way?
If they tell us that with this drug that prevents the disease 10 or 20 years or 30 years before symptoms, needs to make current Alzheimer patients better cognitively in order to be approved for Alzheimer's,
That could take.
it's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's
Because we can't do a 10, 20, 30-year trial,
right.
right? And if you just treat patients who already have Alzheimer's with a drug where they have the forest fire and this drug blows out the match,
Right. Well,
it's
this
not
is
going to work.
one thing that. So, what do you suggest people do? Could they join the trial?
Well, this trial, the trial we need to do will be in people who have a gene, like the ones we discovered, that guarantee they're going to get Alzheimer's.
Right.
Okay. And we can track biomarkers in their blood to tell us what's happening in the brain. Okay. And then we use our GSM to show that those biomarkers are going down, indicating that we're helping the brain.
Right.
And then the hope is the FDA will say that's good enough, should the drug be safe enough, to let us start using it. Because if they raise the bar so high that where they say, no, you have to treat full-blown Alzheimer patients with this drug and make them better,
Yeah.
that's like saying somebody has congestive heart failure and needs a bypass and show that Lipitor makes them better by
Right.
lowering their cholesterol. No, you had to use that 10, 20 years before,
When
right?
did you have your answer?
Sorry?
I said, try not to use your hands so much because that sometimes I think might affect the stutter or something. I don't know. There's something going on, so I want to make sure that we get this last part. I asked you, when do you think you'll have your answer when they'll approve going to human trials for this?
Oh, so we should know by early next year if they approve us to start the safety trials.
Okay.
And the NIH has already given us a very good score on a grant for $7 million to start those trials once the FDA approves.
Okay.
And then once we do the safety trials, and if it looks good, then we'll start trying it in patients. But that's where we have to get the FDA to agree to just let us show in people who are on their way to Alzheimer's because of their genetics.
Right.
Remember, these gene mutations that guarantee the disease, that by tracking protein biomarkers in the blood, it'll tell us that we're fixing things in the brain. We're lowering the amyloid and the tangles in the brain. But then after that, we have to do the next trials, which are phase 2 trials. And that's where you see if it's going to work against the disease. And that's where we have to convince the FDA that we know that our drug even works against the mutations that guarantee Alzheimer's disease.
You already know this.
We already know that it works against the mutation when we use laboratory models. And if we can show it's safe, and then go to the trials in those patients. So we're going to tap in. Washington University, St. Louis has a program called DIAN, the Dominantly Inherited Alzheimer's Network. They have the largest collection of families with those mutations we talked about at the beginning of this discussion that guarantee Alzheimer's disease with early onset, usually by 45, 50 years old.
Okay.
And luckily, that's only 1 or 2% of Alzheimer's. We know in the laboratory models that the GSM works against those mutations. We can go to WashU, to Diane, and say, look, let's test our drug on people where we know they carry these mutations. We know they're on their way to Alzheimer's.
Right.
We can test them and say, we can look for biomarkers in the blood that tell us what's going on in the brain and will inform us as to whether we're helping things in the brain. The hope then is, will the FDA accept that as enough evidence to let the GSM be used to prevent Alzheimer's disease in younger people?
Right.
And we don't know what's going to happen because so far, to get an Alzheimer's drug approved, you have to make Alzheimer patients better.
Right. That could take.
This drug isn't for that purpose. You see?
Yeah. Yeah.
The neuroinflammation drugs, like Amylyx and AZ therapies, that's what we're going to use to treat the patients now. But for the future, where you're going to do early detection of the disease before symptoms and treat, you're going to need the GSM. So don't make us make patients better with that, except that we just have to stop the disease and use biomarkers to see that. That's going to be our challenge. Right now, thankfully, Cure Alzheimer's Fund and NIH have been funding all the work to this point to get to the approval, to get approval to start the trials. And now the NIH looks like they're going to fund us if the FDA lets us do the safety trial. It looks like the NIH is going to probably fund that safety trial as well. The NIH program that allowed us to develop the GSM, where we didn't have to start a company, and we didn't have to go to a pharmaceutical company to get support. The NIH served as our pharmaceutical company with no strings attached.
No, I'm a fan. I wanted them to be on the show so I could have promoted what they're doing.
Yeah.
So,
I think you should still try. You know, Francis Collins.
they actually sent me an email a month after the fact, not from him, and I tried 3 different times. It's something that he should know about, because don't ever discount public opinion. Public opinion is what is going to be the change. That is how we are going to make the change. And that's the only way it's going to happen. And the public's been in the dark. So now they're going to hear about what you're doing. And also, while we're on the subject matter, how can they support you? What can they do to support your efforts?
The best way to support what we're doing is two things. One is support the Cure Alzheimer's Fund. I should also tell you that every $1 into the Cure Alzheimer's Fund is $1 out. They take out no overhead. The founders and board members pay all the overhead. So if they raise $20 million, they give out $20 million. There are other research foundations that give out, 15, 20 cents on the dollar, and the rest goes to overhead. They don't do that. Okay. So that's number one, and that's the foundation that's really doing the top-notch Alzheimer work. I head their research leadership group, and I've done that since the beginning, 15 years now. The other thing is keep telling your senators and your local government and national government to support the NIH, because the NIH is the engine that keeps all this research going.
Yeah.
And, pharma makes the drugs and gets them to people safely. But the seeds of innovation, the discoveries that lead to those drugs are all funded by the NIH and foundations in academia. So it's one big system that needs to be supported. If we don't fund research in our laboratories at universities and hospitals with NIH money and foundations, drug companies have nothing.
Right.
Because they're not, the discovery comes from us.
Right.
Cure Alzheimer's Fund has been a godsend for us.
Right.
In that regard. But I would also say that thanks to the efforts of many of us, the NIH funding for Alzheimer's disease has now gone from a mere $400 million a year to $2 billion a year, which is, so right now to get Alzheimer's funding from NIH, it's a lot better and a lot easier than it was before. But in those lean years, thank goodness we had Cure Alzheimer's Fund to keep this going. Now we have both, and that's why things are moving so fast.
Right.
So, pharma companies do their job with getting the final drugs out the door to people safely. But to develop those drugs and the ideas for those drugs all come from those early ideas that NIH and foundations, private sector fund.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for devoting your life's work to this incredible purpose for every single one of us, because every one of us has been affected in some way, shape, or form with this terrible disease. And I'm so grateful that you've been on the show and been able to share this information. And I just wish you all the best and in making it happen as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for your kind words and good wishes. And I hope all of your viewers understand a little bit more now about Alzheimer's and brain health, and will help support our cause.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the New 100 Longevity Campaign. Bye.
I'm not backing down, 'cause the future is now. Not backing down, 'cause the future is now.